So, you're thinking of moving to Seattle. Well, today I'm going to be discussing all the cons of moving to Seattle, Washington. Now, I am a Washington native and I do love living here, but I think it's important to be transparent about some of the things that the city could work on and just in general, some things I think might be a deterrent depending on what your preferences are. My name is Madysonarthur, a local real estate broker in the region, helping buyers and sellers find the right fit. Now, let's jump right in. The very first that I'm going to talk about is no surprise, but it is the fact that Seattle has become one of the most expensive places to live in the US. It is actually, I believe I just read, the most expensive place to eat out in the country, which is actually ridiculous. But costs have gone higher and higher and higher. I believe partly because of the massive tech scene here, and also in part because of the desirability. I mean, it's a wonderful place to live. So what's happening is the home prices are just skyrocketing and becoming really, really expensive. So that's probably the number one con I'd say about moving here is it's going to be really, really pricey. And so it's a trade-off that you're going to have to really think about and make. And with that in mind, while it is expensive, we also do have a lot of good job opportunities, especially in the tech field. So depending on your industry, maybe it does make sense to move here. It just really comes up to your preferences. Alright, next on this list is the traffic here in Seattle. We have a lot of water, which means that there are plenty of bridges, and those can get bottlenecked very easily. So during rush hour traffic, what might be a typical 15 to 20 minute commute could be 45 minutes or even an hour, and that can be a major problem when it comes to daily commuters. So one of the things that you're going to have to consider is how you strategically place where you live in comparison to where you work. Oftentimes people try to move close to their offices versus being commuters because it's going to really influence your day-to-day life. Okay, number 3 is the social scene. Now, in my opinion, I have never found this to be a problem, but I'm also a local, and so I have so many friends and family in the area that I don't necessarily need to branch out the same way that other people do. However, I absolutely love visiting Texas, partly because it's so different than Washington, so it's nice to just see something that's almost the exact opposite. But when I go there, I do often think about how vibrant the social scene tends to be. People are much more likely to mix and mingle within different social circles. I've found that here in Seattle, people tend to stay within their niches more than other cities. I feel like Seattle is slightly more cliquey in a way. And I will say too, when you hear the term Seattle freeze, I think what it really is that people do most of their socializing kind of in the summer when the weather is really nice and people are all out and about. And then during the more autumnal and colder months, people kind of get into that cozy mindset, are more likely to relax and stay at home. I actually really enjoy it. I almost feel like it's a time to reset and unwind. And I really love that Seattle has seasons that influence kind of what you do with your life, whereas a lot of other states where the weather is really nice, it almost feels like time is stagnant because the weather isn't really changing your activities. So generally my thoughts are that I think Seattle can be a little bit more of a reserved place, especially seasonally. Now, that being said, I do want to acknowledge also that there are lots of groups. People love to do things here, love to do activities. And so if you want to join a network of people who have the same hobby as you will absolutely find that here. So that is kind of something that offsets maybe what people think is the freeze. So I would say Seattle is probably the most, if not one of the most casual cities in the US. You won't ever need to dress up to go out to a nice dinner. The culture here is very accepting. We kind of are relaxed with whatever you want to do. Even at conferences, professional conferences, you might still find people wearing, jeans with a button-up or a more sort of casual appearance than a full suit. It's just a place that is super lax. And, some people really love that, but I think for some it might feel a little bit too casual and not as dressy as they might like, which seems kind of silly, but it does really go into the culture. I think it's just a very chill place that's very accepting. But for some, they want to be able to dress up and feel kind of more glamorous and ritzy. This is definitely not that type of city. Now, we've discussed weather and seasonality a little bit when it comes to the social scene, but I want to discuss who Seattle definitely wouldn't be for in terms of its kind of weather. So if you're someone who doesn't like overcast and gloom, then you will not like Seattle. Generally speaking, people make it seem like it rains all the time here. It doesn't. In fact, I believe New York actually has more annual rainfall than Seattle. But the difference is that you have so much gloom here. Even in the summer, you'll have many days where it's cloudy. There's no consistent time of year where it's pure sun. And so I think that if you're someone who really needs sunlight, then you might find it a little difficult here. We definitely have to take our vitamin D throughout the winter months. So in that respect, I do think there might be some cons depending on if you can kind of handle that or not. Okay, so next on the list is construction. Now I know this is pretty common with a lot of major cities, and while it is generally a good thing that it's a growing city, it's definitely a con for your day-to-day life because we do have lots of road closures and construction noise, and I do feel at times that there's just a lot going on. And so if that's something that kind of annoys you or you find that to be an inconvenience, then this might be something to add to your list or at least consider, especially when finding the right place to move. Okay, the next on the list is the homeless crisis currently happening, honestly, in a lot of cities in the US, particularly along the West Coast. This is something that's a problem here, and I do know that there's been a lot of changes enacted, more so than some of the other cities that I've seen, but I think the problem is more about prevention, and it can influence your day-to-day living depending on where you are in the city, especially closer to downtowns and large bridgeways. There's pretty large groups of people that can result in making you, feel unsafe, and those are more crime-ridden areas oftentimes. But in general, it's a problem that the city is still really trying to figure out how to manage. It's obviously not good for the people living on the streets. It's also really bad for some of the local businesses. So yeah, there's, I think, a lot of work still to be done. I think they're making progress, but it's certainly something that the city struggles with and something to, be aware of if you're home searching and trying to figure out where it feels like a good fit to live. At the end of the day, it is a problem, so it's worth addressing. So the next on my list isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I think this video is tailored towards someone trying to figure out how to move here. And it's that every neighborhood is very, very different from the next. And so I think it can be kind of difficult to figure out where you want to live because everywhere just has a very unique identity. And so that can feel kind of like a challenge because you don't know what makes sense for you until you've really come visited. That being said, that is where I come in. So I have plenty of videos. I'll link a playlist up above about different neighborhoods in the area, and I highly recommend you watch it just to start helping you figure out the different lifestyles and kind of vibes for each neighborhood because they are pretty different. Alright, so I think that's probably a pretty good list. I'm going to wrap up there. I might be making a part 2. But I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on what the cons are here as someone who's lived in Washington my whole life. So if you're interested in, relocating, buying or selling, let's definitely connect. My information is down below. Thanks so much for watching. I will see you for the next one. Bye.